Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with the continuation of the story. There are people actually out there waiting to hear this, and so you're going to get to hear it today. This is going to be the wrap up on school. This is going to be me going into the Navy, me getting out of the Navy up to the point where I met my wife. That is the rough structure of how this is going to go. We're going to fall back very briefly to talk about the incident that somehow I managed to miss in the last one. We didn't, for some reason, talk about the ending situation, right? When I tried to start the shotgun situation. I wasn't, well, let me do this different. I was still dating Rhonda, but it was the on again, off again portion, and it was before she tried to end herself. And my cousin Tommy had done that to himself. He had done the exact same mechanism by which I was going to do it. And that was the first time in my life that anybody that I knew had actually done that. And it was behind a girl. It was behind being upset about the breakup. And so I thought to myself, that's a damn fine idea. I wasn't depressed, right? I was sad because we were break up, get together. And then, of course, in my mind, that's all me. And so I thought that was going to be an option. I thought that it was going to be the correct option. And so I sat on the side of my bed with a 12 gauge pump shotgun, and I stuck it to the roof of my mouth, and I can still taste the gun oil today. I can still taste the steel. I can still taste the gun oil. And I pulled the trigger. It clicked. I was like, well, that sucks. And I racked in another one, and I did it again. Pull the trigger. Click. Tried it one more time. I hit the button, and it didn't happen. And so I took all those three, and I went outside, and I shot them, and they worked. I look at that as divine intervention. I do not recommend that anyone ever rely upon that. I was young. I was 16 at the time, and for me, it was just the option, right? It wasn't about being depressed. I wasn't in a depressive state. I was sad. I didn't have any emotional tools at all, how to deal with any type of emotional disappointment or how to overcome those type of things, the stuff that we talk about here. I didn't have any of that. It's part of the reason why I do this, is so that other people can have the tools to overcome that in a much healthier manner than the manner in which I did, right? That was not my only attempt. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell a single soul for 2 decades. Nobody knew that I tried at all for a solid 2 decades. The second time I attempted, we had once again broken up. Once again, it was Rhonda. And I tried to take an entire bottle of Benadryl, and it was probably 200 of those pills in the bottle. I took all of them. And then I had a bottle of Tylenol, and I took that whole bottle too. And once again, I didn't tell anybody. Nothing came of it other than I got really sick and I didn't feel good, and my lamp attacked me in the middle of the night, right? I'm sitting there looking, and then my lamp caught my attention, and I look over and it started growing hair. And I was like, man, that's wild. And then the hair started changing color, and then all of a sudden it reached out, tried to grab me, and I'm like, oh. It scared the shit out of me. But I thought I was going home, so it was whatever. Again, there is no logical reason why I should be here, and I am eternally grateful that God decided to keep me here. But you should once again not rely upon that. Seek help. I didn't really have that option, right? Where I was then, therapy was no longer even discussed. And so for me, that was what I thought was going to be the appropriate response. It absolutely was not, and I wish, right, I'm glad that it didn't complete, but I wish that I wouldn't have even tried. I do. It doesn't change anything. I don't dwell on it, but it is a situation which I would not wish upon anyone. That's going to put a nice little bow on the entirety of the Rhonda situation, right? That should have been in the last video, and so we had to hit that first. Shortly after me and Rhonda broke up was the Mickey situation, right? And we talked briefly about the Mickey situation, but that leads into this next part, right? Now, Me and Mickey, for the few weeks that we interacted, were partners in crime, right? We had this operation going where we were taking ragweed, drying it out, bagging it up, and selling it to people. And part of that process was the money distribution, and he wasn't entirely happy about the money distribution. And so after the guns, like that whole situation that I didn't even know about, right, that resolved, right? As far as the police were concerned, I was not involved. Mickey knew that I wasn't involved. But the money situation behind the ragweed became an issue. And so at school one day, he decided that he was going to take that situation into his own hand. And I'm going to relay this because it is one of my better stories. We were coming in from lunch, right? 5th hour. And the Jackson School complex is 3 wings that are attached. And this wing way over here is the elementary school. And then you have the middle school over here. And then you have the high school is this whole block over here. And in the back corner of the block was the door that you would walk in. And there was no teachers that supervised this particular area, but that's where a good chunk of the students would go in. I was walking and I had my friend Samantha. I had her book sack in my left hand, and I had my friend Casey's book sack in my right hand, and I had my book sack on my back. And I walked in the door and somebody hit me in the back of the head, and it's like, bam. And so I dropped my book sacks, right? I shucked mine off, I dropped their book sacks, and I turned around, and there's Mickey standing in the door. And I threw my hands out like this, and he threw his hands out like this, and then I walked into that bitch. I came up, I walked up to him, and he's expecting me to hit him in the face, so that's not what I did. I done learned how to fight dirty a long time ago at Jackson Middle School. And so I got down deep, and I came up hard, and I caught him in his nuts, full-fledged, with all the strength that I could bring to muster. I uppercutted him in his gonad so hard that they should have popped out of his mouth. I lifted him 2 feet off the ground, and he fell back against the wall. And I come up, and I was going to rack him, boy. I come up, and just as I was coming up, bam, something hit me from behind, and then it's bam, 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 bam. Well, it turns out Mickey decided he wasn't going to fight alone. He got 4 people to come along with him. And the first one of these guys, a guy named Jared Talley, had a pool cue, about yay long, the butt end, the fat part, and he wrapped it in black electrical tape. And he hit me right here. That was the first lick I felt from behind. He hit me right here, and that pool cue wrapped all the way around my head. I shattered it all the way down, and it wrapped all the way around. And then they started, everybody just started popping in. That's when my teeth got broke, right? That first lick hit me here, and it didn't break my skull, but it broke the stick. And then the second lick with the stick hit me across my teeth, and it cracked them, right? That didn't become evident for several years down the road, but all my teeth in the front are jacked up. We talked about that before. I don't really show it, but they're messed up right now. I don't have the money to get them fixed. That's where that happened. Well, they beat my ass, right? All 5 of them. Mickey recovered, and all 5 of them put a whooping on me. I walked up the 6th hour, and I was bleeding a little bit out my nose, but I knew how to take care of a nosebleed. That was an easy one, right? You put a little pressure underneath your lip right here. If you take a piece of paper towel and you stick it underneath there, if you got a nosebleed, don't stick the paper in your nose. That doesn't work. Stick it underneath there and put a little bit of pressure. It cuts off the blood flow to your nose, and it resolves itself. So I went to class. We get into 6th hour. I do my thing. Teacher doesn't ask anything. And I go to leave. And there they are, all 5 of them standing right there. And I walked up to them. I said, you know what, y'all a bunch of bitch-ass motherfuckers got to jump on somebody 5-1. So they caught me again. Not then, right? They didn't have the nuts to do it when the teachers were around, but they caught me on the school bus. I get on the school bus, and they caught me. As I sat down, they rushed up into the bus, hit from behind, once again, knocks me into the seat, and then they just don't let me up. And I'm talking about they worked me. They worked me pretty good. That's where this comes into play. Y'all see my graduation photo, it's a little bit scratched up. But if you look really close, right above that little white spot, my eye is black. They whooped my ass good, right? I tell that story because that's a good way to get a grasp on who Mickey was. And it's a good way to get a grasp on who I was at that point in time. I was a dude that fought. That's what I did. And if they wouldn't have caught me from behind, if I would have had any of my people with me, if I'd have been a little bit more situationally aware, it probably would have went a little bit different. But they got me. They whooped my ass pretty good. Ain't but one of them got anything left coming to them, no. That led into the whole, later I got arrested, right, behind Mickey, right? Mickey was a bitch, and Mickey was trying to get me to take the fall for his stuff. Well, I had to go live with my grandma. My mom decided that I couldn't stay any longer at my dad's house. Between the fight and the going to prison and all of the things, she just wasn't very comfortable with me there anymore, and I can understand that. So she sent me to go live with my grandma in Jackson. Well, that was when I met Christina. Now, this was, in all respects, my first real relationship. Me and Rhonda dated. Me and Rhonda were engaged in adult activities, even though neither one of us was an adult. But it was mainly focused around those adult activities and not really on anything other than that. The Christina situation was different, right? We met in the snack line at Jackson High School, and I forget how the exact conversation went, but I was talking to her friend about something, and she called me gay, and I said, like, you just saying that because you want to fuck me. That's who I was. And so it worked. She gave me her number. We talked for 3 or 4 days, and then we started dating. And that was my first real relationship. That was the first time that I actually exposed myself in any type of manner, like on a less than sensual nature. It's the first time I talked about hopes and dreams and aspirations. It was the first time any of that happened, but I was a child, and I was in no way equipped to be who I needed to be in that situation. My experience with relationships was purely physical, and I did not have any of the tools to deal with emotional responsibility. I was wrathful. I got into fights a lot. I was extremely carnal. That was a major focus in my life. I was extremely jealous. I had insecurity issues, so that naturally leads into jealousy. We dated for the rest of my high school. That was about 6 months. And then, like, the whole situation resolved itself with the court, so I had to join the military, and I chose the Navy. I had been going to join the Army, but I decided I'm going to join the Navy because I looked into survival rates. I was like, all right, let's look and see. I got to do one. Let's look at it. Well, in the Marine Corps, the average survival rate on the beachhead is 3 seconds. For the Army, that extends to 15 seconds. For the Air Force, it's about 3 days, I think is what it was. And then in the Navy, it's 30 years. I was like, well, fuck, sign me up. Put me on the ship. My grandfather had been in the Navy, so I joined the Navy. I didn't really have a choice about that, right? I had to join the military or I had to go to prison. And so I joined the military. But, once again, I'm not a very responsible person. Back then, for sure. And I wasn't somebody you could rely upon. So I was really good about making promises that I didn't keep, and I was really good about focusing on me, but not so much on other people. For graduation, I paid for her and my brother to come up and ride a bus, right? A Greyhound, right? Looking back on this, I'm like, man, I'm such a dick. But, like, my brother and my girlfriend rode up for graduation, and that was the only 2 people for me that was there. Me and my mom were pretty much estranged, right? After the whole get out of jail and graduate, I was mad. I was upset behind the conditions and all of the things. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do what other people wanted me to do. And so I went no contact with my mom for a long time. I don't even know how long. And so my mom wasn't there. My dad was not going to be an option. My other grandma was sick. Like, there was nobody else that would come. So my girlfriend and my brother came, and the whole time they were actually there, all we did, like I kicked my brother out of the hotel room, and then me and Christina did adult activities the whole time. My little brother overdosed while he was there. Like, he got some Dramamine and overdosed on Dramamine, wound up in the hospital. And that probably had a lot to do with what like my mindset, right? Like, I kicked him out. He came up there to see me, to celebrate me graduating boot camp. And all I could think about was that nookie. That's all that was on my mind. And so, like, that whole situation happened. And the way it works is you get, there's the weekend, and you get 2 out of the 3 days, and you got to stand duty on 1 of the 3 days. Well, for me, my 3rd day was the duty day. I had Friday and Saturday off, and we spent that in adult activities. And then Sunday was the 3rd day, and that was between Saturday night and Sunday is when my brother overdosed. And they let me out, and I didn't go see him. I went and saw Christina, and we again engaged in adult activities. That's who I was, right? Over the course of time, I got to my ship. That took a little while. Let's back up. I was wanting to be committed, but I was not fully committed in the way that I should have been, right? She was way down here in Louisiana. I was way up in Great Lakes, Illinois. I just got out of the Navy. I was in the best shape of my life. I was down to 172 pounds, which was significantly less than what I went in there with. And so I was out there trying to do things, and I wasn't really doing them. I was just kind of flirting and things of that nature. But again, I wasn't committed to the level that I should have been to be in a relationship. Like, I had proposed to her by this point, and like, I bought the ring right out of boot camp. I went and bought an incredibly expensive ring on credit. It was a rock, right? I bought it at the mall on credit. They'll give you credit for anything if you're in the military. And so I was presenting commitment, but I was full of my games, right? I was the type of person that would try to invoke jealousy in you so that I could feel more secure in myself. So I would tell her that that this girl came up to talk to me, or that I met this person and they came to me, and all of these things. But while I was out there flirting and we wasn't actually engaging in anything. I'm built a little bit weird. And I was trying to keep her interested by expressing things that would make her jealous. That is a repeating pattern for a little while. And so naturally, that led to her being insecure. Naturally, that led to a breakdown in communication and those things. But one thing that you need to know about me is I am absolutely terrible about staying in contact. Well, that doesn't help a relationship at all, right? I would only call her when I was on duty and I couldn't leave the base. I would only talk to her if I had nothing else that me and my friends wanted to go do. It was that type of a situation. I was not nearly prepared for the level of commitment that I was trying to present. So I spent time at Great Lakes, Illinois. I got there February of, when was it? 97. Yeah, no, 96. I graduated in 95. I had 6 months or so delayed processing, and then I went in February 21st of 1996. I graduated boot camp February, March, April. So around April 21st, they came up. And then I was at Great Lakes for A school and C school, which is the first school was Engineman. I learned diesel engine mechanics. I learned how to work on pretty much any diesel engine you could think of. And then I got my specialization, which is C school, and that was air conditioning and refrigeration. I went and I was 3rd in my class at NEC in our school. So I got to choose my duty station. I chose the USS Cape St. George, which is the finest ship in the Navy, CG-71, a Ticonderoga class guided missile cruiser. I was an engineman. I filled the AC&R billet on my ship. but I was still a completely unreliable person. I went in under the advanced placement program, right? Which means that when you graduate boot camp, you get automatically promoted to E3. And then when you spend your time in rate, which was 6 months or so, then you got promoted automatically to E4, which is Petty Officer Third Class, which is the first of the non-commissioned officer classes. I never made it to that. I got in trouble, right? I had severe discipline issues. Imagine that. I was no means responsible. I was no reflection of the honor, courage, and commitment of the United States Navy. What was the first one? I think the first mast, there was more than one. Captain's mast is non-judicial punishment. What that means is that the captain on the ship is pretty much the deciding factor for a lot of things. There are things that are beyond the scope of the captain to make decisions upon, but anything of a minor nature falls to the captain for discipline. You go before him, he pronounces whatever your punishment is, you serve your time, and then, things move on. It's not it is recorded, but it's not really the strong mark that a court-martial would be. And I think the first one was me just not doing my work. I think we called it gun decking, right? You would just pencil whip, make up numbers, and I had the AC&R responsibility, but there was somebody else already there who was an E5 who was doing that now. He was scheduled to leave within a year, which is why I got the billet. But I wasn't nearly responsible enough to be fully in charge of the refrigeration systems. I worked on them. I was the assistant. I did the things, but it was always under supervision and things of that nature. But you do other things too. They have what's called the preventative maintenance program. It used to be anyway. And there was scheduled tasks, daily, weekly, and monthly, that you had to complete. Part of my task was to go around with this little sensor attached to a computer and go to the various pieces of equipment, and you attach the sensor and you did vibration monitoring. Fucking easy. The skatist job on the ship. And I didn't do it. Right, I gun decked it. I took the machine and well, after a couple of months, that caught up with me because somebody else did it. And when they did it, the readings were way different for them than it was for me. And that's not a natural progression, right? Those things naturally degrade over time. They have to be adjusted. That's why you make the readings. I didn't think about that. I was worried about doing other things. And so that's how I got in trouble. So that was my first mast, and I got 30 days restricted to ship. I had half month's pay times 2, which means they take half your pay for the month twice. So for 2 months. And extra duty. So you're restricted to the ship for 30 days, and you have to do extra things in the evening. So I did all of that. I got through that, and on the other side of that, I invited Christina to come up. Now, I'm in no financial situation to do anything. They've already taken most of my money. I'm trying to catch up on bills and things of that nature because I bought this ring. I'm paying $300 a month on this ring. And let me tell you, an E2 or an E3 does not make a whole lot of money. And that came out direct deposit. So they were taking that out of my check whether I wanted it to or not. And so I invited her up, and we had to stay at a friend's house. He had an apartment with several, 2 other people and his wife. And me and Christina stayed in the living room. And once again, I am not a mature person in any way, shape, or form. And I have addictive personalities, right? I tend to get addicted to certain things, and video games is one of those. And I'm not the type of person to easily overcome that. Well, my friend Chris, who was where we were staying, had Warcraft 2, maybe 3, on the computer. Not World of Warcraft, but the actual Warcraft strategy game. That's what it is. It's a strategy game. Well, I got caught up in that, and so I didn't have any money. We were staying at a friend's house in the living room, and I was spending the whole time that she was there to visit me doing that. We're in Virginia Beach. We didn't go to the beach, right? I didn't have a car. We couldn't go anywhere. I didn't have any money to do anything. For some reason, I was thinking I was going to have money, but I'm a dumbass, and that never happened. And so that situation went south, right? I am playing this video game for the entire time that she's there, and she's talking to Chris's roommate. Now, I did not think that that situation was progressing in the manner in which it did. Well, it turns out that that was probably one step too far for her, and that's absolutely understandable in retrospect. And so her, and I can't even remember his name, but her and him were talking, and like there's a whole process that goes behind it, but we're just going to shorten it. One night, while we were together in this, and like it was like 4 days, right? 3 days, 4 days. I took leave for it, but I couldn't go anywhere or do anything because I didn't have money. And so we engaged in adult activities, and then I went to sleep, and she went into his room and engaged in some different adult activities. I didn't know about it. She went home the next day. About a week later, I found out about it. Maybe even 2 weeks. And the way I found out about it was one of the guys that he worked with, he was bragging to, and that guy came to me and he's like, "Hey, bro, I think you need to know this." And so I called her, and I'm at the phone bank in Norfolk, Virginia, which is like 50 phones, and it's open. There's no booths or anything like that. You're sitting next to people, and I'm on the phone with her and crying my eyes out because she cheated on me. Now, that was in large part my fault. I take large chunks of responsibility for that, but nobody made you put the penis in your mouth. That was a decision that you made. I forgave her. I was like, "Hey, we can work through this. We can get past this." Well, it turns out we couldn't, and so that was the thing. Between us breaking up, between this happening and us breaking up, I went home. I took another leave, and I was able to make it home this time. I get down there, I stay with my dad, and we engaged in adult activities. And after that one time, there was a shelf above the bed, and she went to lay down, and she hit her eye on the shelf. And this is no shit, I ain't gonna reason to lie. And she got a black eye, right? Well, I went home the next day, and she told everybody I was beating on her. She told everybody I laid my hands on her. Now, there's one thing I can tell you, I don't do that, right? In the same way that consent is very important to me, I don't hit women, right? I don't hit ladies. If you hit me, that's a whole different situation. I would knock your block off. But I'm not going to just hit you. I'm not a beater. But she told everybody I was. She went around telling everybody that. Before we broke up shortly after that, and there's, again, me playing a large part in that. My emotional immaturity, my inability to take responsibility. These things all played a part in that. Her mom had a trailer on the property, and she allowed us to cohabit this property on her property here in Louisiana while I was gone. And I was supposed to be sending money home. I was supposed to be paying bills, and I wasn't. I was out getting drunk and acting stupid and getting in fights and all of the things that you do in the Navy. And so then we broke up. There was, again, like she was telling people I was beating on her, and it wasn't a pleasant breakup. Most of that was due to me, but not all of it. That led into depressive states. Right. This is when I actually started dealing with actual depression. But I'm in the Navy. I have a job to do. So I didn't. Right. I'd already not done my job once, but I really didn't after this. I was going out every night that I wasn't on duty, and I was getting hammered. But the thing is like I wasn't really buying all of the alcohol, so I was able to consume a lot more alcohol than I would have been able to. And I would get off at 4 o'clock. I would be in the bar for 4:30. I would close the bar down at 2 o'clock. We would hit the after hours bar at 2:30. We would close that down at 5, and I would be at muster at 6. Stinking drunk. I'm talking about can't even stand up straight. And then I would go find somewhere to hide, and then I would go do it again the next day. Every fourth day I had duty, so every fourth day I was sober. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been sober at all the entire time. Then I stole. There was a guy named Heminger, and he had $20. I needed $20. I took his $20. But again, not being able to be responsible in any way, shape, or form. When I got brought up to mast, I lied about it. I said, well, I just found it and all of this. And so that resulted in me, right, after the first time I was an E3. First mast, they knocked me back down to an E2. Second mast, I went from E2 to E1. And then I went back up to E2, and I come back up to E3, and then I got knocked back down to E2. I make the joke that I made E3 3 times. So the second time was that. Well, that brought up beef between me and Heminger, right? Now, that was me in large part bringing the beef, even though it was really his place to want it because I stole from him. I spend my time 30 days restricted, or 45. It was 45 and 45 that time, half month pays times 2. That was extra duty and restricted to the ship for 45 days, and they took 2 months of money again. And this was this was just before the first deployment. First deployment, we went to the Baltic. Now, the Baltic is way up at the top of the globe, and we were doing what's called Balt Ops, Baltic Operations. It is a multinational war game situation, and my ship is the best ship in the Navy, and that is true. We went over there with a piece of our carrier group. We wasn't the whole carrier group, but there was significant chunks of it. There was us and our sister ship, the Anzio, a couple of destroyers, a couple of frigates, and a coastie ship. Well, we went over there and we had the Baltops and its war games for a week, and everybody else in our entire group got knocked out day one. They took out every other person or every other ship in the fleet day one. But the Cape, we won. We won the entire thing. We took out all 7 of the other fleets with just the one ship. Simulated activities, no actual combat engaged in. But that's where I got to do my first tour of foreign countries. We went, we did Cove, Ireland first, and then we did Portsmouth, England. We went to Germany, northern France, Poland, back to Germany, and I think that's all we did there. We went back, spent a lot of time in the bars once again, even though I was not 21, right? I turned 21, actually no, I turned 21 on that deployment. That was Baltops 97. No, 98. We returned from that. I spent a lot of time in the bars. And this is where I really started hanging out in the strip clubs. Now, I went to the strip clubs and I never bought a stripper a drink. It wasn't my gig. I went and I played pool. The strippers bought me drinks. And then I started working the door at the strip club because I'm a little bit handy and it comes in handy. And so I was getting free drinks, staying hammered. Rented a place across the street, me and my homeboys. We rented a place across the street, and once again, completely irresponsible, didn't pay any bills. That situation broke down, but I started dating one of the strippers. The stripper that I was dating was named Marcia, and she had 2 kids, no custody. She had a propensity to things, but I wasn't really dealing with those things. I was smoking my herb, but that was about all I did at that point in time. That situation devolved over time because, those activities lead to other activities, and it is what it is. We were not necessarily exclusive through the whole situation. There was several multis going on, right? I was somewhat of a promiscuous young man. I have not been shy about that, right? And so we did things. Like, she would bring chicks home from the club, and we did things, and it was fun. But like, that's not a relationship, and so we fell apart. I didn't pay the bills. We lost the trailer when we lived in the trailer across the street. And that whole situation devolved, and then we went into a deployment. This time we went to the Mediterranean. We were deployed to the Mediterranean, and while we were deployed, we got called up to combat operations. We got to Bosnia, Herzegovina, that conflict that was going on there. We were part of the UN detachment. I have a ribbon that I get to wear on my chest because of that. And we were peacekeeping. We were never involved in combat, but we were definitely combat ready the entire time. We received hazard duty pay, tax-free status, all of the good things. And on that deployment, we got sent to the Middle East. Now, in that deployment, we got to go, I hit Italy, Santorini Island, Greece, southern France, I forget what port, and then we got pulled. We hit Turkey right before we went to the Suez. We got deployed to the Middle East in late 1998, going into, well, no, 99 is when I got out. So we got back in February of 99. So this was probably December-ish, maybe even November. We get deployed to the Middle East, and we get over there, and we did Bahrain, we did Dubai, we did the UAE. I forget where else we went, but I got my second combat ribbon there. It was another combat deployment. We were forward deployed. My ship, being the best in the Navy, we got to be the point ship, which was that we had what's the Aegis system, which means that the rest of the fleet stayed about 200 miles offshore, and we were about 30 miles offshore. My ship by itself. And they would launch their missiles to us, and then we would direct the missiles to where they needed to go. We were 14 minutes from active deployment of armaments. Everything was weapons hot. All the safeties were off. All the codes were plugged in. We were right there at the point of, you may remember, Saddam Hussein was being a dickhead. 1998, and it got really close to combat operations. That was my deployment. Once again, we never got into real heat, but this time, like, we had to run around in full MOP gear, which is Military Operating Protective Procedures, I think is what that is, MOPP. But if you've ever seen Outbreak and they walk around and they got the big suit on, that's what we were in. We had atropine and adrenaline strapped to our side in case we got attacked, chemically attacked, so that you could continue the mission. And it was a very real possibility that we would be under attack at any point in time. We did, in fact, have some engagement with some pirates. That 50 cal took care of that shit. But other than that, like, there was no real heat, right? We were there, we were combat deployed, but there was no actual engage in combat for that situation. And so I've got a nice little ribbon that I get to wear alongside my National Defense ribbon for that. But that led into another NJP, right, which is non-judicial punishment, Captain's Mast. And this was the fight. This was the not fight, right? I had finally decided I'm going to give the Navy a good go. I'm going to commit myself to this. I'm going to do the right things. And my petty officer came up one day at the end of shift, right? We were already released to liberty. And he came up and he's like, I need you to go take care of this. And I was like, I'll jump on it first thing in the morning. And he's like, no, you're going to go take care of it now. And I swung, but I caught myself, right? I was wanting to stay in. So I drew back and I hit the bulkhead. And I broke my hand right here. Boxer's fracture. You may be familiar, you may not, but for 2 or 3 days, I didn't do anything. My hand swelled up. It was fucking huge. I didn't do anything. I didn't go to medical. I didn't report anything. As far as I knew, he didn't either. But it turns out that he did. I go to medical. I told them that I fell. And they're like, yeah, okay, you fell. There's no way you did this falling. I stuck to my guns because, that's what I do. And so I got my third NJP for that, for not hitting my petty officer. They kicked me out of the Navy for destruction of government property. Right? My captain told me, no shit, Captain Hardball Harvey, he later became admiral. And he looked at me and he said, son, you don't play well with other children. I don't want you in my Navy anymore. And so they gave me a general under honorable conditions, which is one step below an honorable. And effectively, all that did was keep me from getting any of my benefits. No GI Bill, no medical treatments, no retirements, no anything resulted. I did my job. I was there. I did my job. I did it honorably, but I had disciplinary issues, so I got that separation. That was February of 1999. I was just shy of 3 years out of my 6-year commitment. So I get back down here and I go live with my cousin. And I start working in the plants because that's all I can do. I can't get an AC&R job because if you are unaware, the things that you get trained for in the Navy don't really correlate into real world. I had certifications in Caterpillar and International diesel mechanics. Couldn't get a job doing that. I had an EPA certification along with a license. Couldn't get a job doing that because they only teach you half of it, right? If you are an engineman, which I was, you don't get to learn anything dealing with the electronics. That's a severe detriment if you're looking for a job. So I went into boiler making. Now, that involves a lot of breaking apart dangerous things. You go into the plants and they have reactors where they turn one chemical into another through the use of a catalyst. Boiler makers are the ones that bolt up the insides of that. They are the ones that make the catalyst flow in the way that it needs to do. You go in and you do all of those things. And it wasn't a horrible job, but it wasn't, a fun one, right? It was a lot of really hot work and a lot of really shitty conditions. And so while it's really good money, it is not necessarily something that you want to do. And me, being the irresponsible me, I started doing other things, And I became a karaoke DJ, which sounds funny to say, but it was incredibly fun to do. And that's where I met my wife. Prior to that, I was living in the van for the Ram Jam was the company that I worked for, doing the karaoke. Now, my friend Steve actually had the job. I was just helping him. And so I lived in the van with the equipment and worked for the tips that we would get. It wasn't incredibly lucrative, but it was a lot less stressful than going into the plants. And so that's what I did. I was running into the bars every night except Sunday, and we were doing karaoke. And sometimes karaoke, we would do private parties and stuff on Sundays. And it wasn't horrible money, but it was not like I was able to eat and I was able to do things, but not like a lot of things. There was no put up money. There was no save or anything of that nature. But when I started the karaoke circuit is when I met Marcel. Now, we're going to talk about Marcel because that was the next real relationship that I got into, but I didn't know that bitch was married. I really didn't. Like, it was a whole situation that I can't get into, but it was an inadvertent meeting of her. Somebody else was interested in her, and a situation evolved where I had to take control and act like she was with me, and it wound up that she would prefer to be with me. That happened a couple of times. But we dated for a little bit prior to me winding up in the van. We lived in an apartment in Zachary with someone else. But the whole time she was married. I didn't know. Like, she told me that they were separated and or getting a divorce, right? So I knew she was married, but not that she was like still actively married. That came up a couple of months later. But we were living with someone else in a 2-bedroom apartment with this woman, her 3 kids. One of their kids had a kid, and then me and Marcel, like all of us in this 2-bedroom apartment. Which, by the way, later me and my wife rented when my daughter was born. But that situation devolved into her cheating on me again because, shitbag. Like, I don't blame them so much, like Marcel a little bit more than Christina, for the things that happened, because I was not a responsible man. I was not doing anything that a man should be doing. And so that whole situation devolved and we broke apart. And that's pretty much it. Like, I don't know that there's a whole lot more to expound upon for this, right? This was the rest of the story up until me and my wife. And then at that point, it is our story. We're already telling that story. It's been a while since we've done an episode. We've only really done the one, but that is something that we're going to do together. So I'm not going to talk about that too much more here. But I wanted to talk about that part, right? Because this, in part, is me taking responsibility for myself in those situations. I was not prepared for the responsibility. I was not prepared for the emotions. I was not prepared for taking accountability or doing the correct thing. My wife helped me to get there. But when I met my wife, I was living in the Ram Jam van, right? I was completely broke. No car of my own. Like, it was me just being wandering stone, doing the thing. And my wife really helped me to mature and to understand that I needed to. I don't hold animosity towards any of the people involved that we talked about other than Mickey bitch ass Lemoyne. Everybody else, like, that was more me than them. All my homeboys in the Navy were better than I deserved. Right? That is a very real thing. And we didn't talk about them too much. Like, I could tell Navy stories all day long. Like, we went cliff diving in Greece into 2.5 feet of water. Like, climbed a mountain. There was a whole situation with that. And, like, there's all kinds of Navy stories that I could tell, but they don't really serve the purpose in what we do here. It was me being drunk and stupid. And I don't want to glorify that activity more than I have. Being drunk and stupid is part of growing up. It is part of overcoming who you were. If you watch the first episode, maybe you can understand how this one happened, right? The first video talked about my childhood and how I got shaped into who I become. The Navy, that situation leading up into the Navy, that played a large part in that too, right? That was me running from the responsibilities. That was me not facing the things that I needed to. That was me being a shitbag sailor, right? Like, my command tried so very hard, to keep me in line, and I was not having it. They gave me more than enough chances. They gave me every opportunity to correct myself. And I didn't take them. They offered me resources that I didn't want them. Like, this is me for the first time out loud, really expounding upon my responsibility in that. I spent a large part of my life blaming other people for those situations, right? What Christina did, while not excusable, I blamed on her when I had the largest part of that in me. It was me not being ready. It was me not being fully committed. It was me not putting the energy into the relationship. Like, she was a good woman. She was. She was much better than I deserved. And was either one of us fully mature? No. But I broke a good woman. I did. She was fully committed to me and I wasn't to her. And that's what led to her cheating on me. That's the same thing several times. Like the whole Marsha situation, if I would have handled that in a different way, we may have wound up married. I could have married a stripper. She tried to put a kid on me. We didn't talk about that. We'll hit that real quick. I got back from deployment, right? And between getting back from deployment and getting kicked out of the Navy, Marsha wound up pregnant. Now, who she wound up pregnant for, who knows? But I got home after deployment and I got a letter in the mail. Hey, you're required for child support. And I'm like, wait, what? No. And so eventually I got a DNA test and like me and that child are barely even the same species. It was a 99.99% chance that I was not the father. And so it resolved in the way that it should have. But when I first got that, I called her. I was like, hey, I want you to come down here and live with me. Come down here, raise the kid with me. Right? I tried to take the responsibility there and it didn't work. Thank God. But like, that was what really made me think, you know what? I really want a family. It was after that that me and Kelly got together and we started doing, and there was a couple of relationships in between there, but again, it was me being stupid, and there's no real reason to drag them into it. They were short. They were pleasurable, but that's all there really was to it. The main relationship in my life, other than my wife, was Christina, and I fucked that all up. It took me a long time to accept any responsibility for that, but it also took me an extremely long time to let that shit go. I held on to that. That was part of the reason why it took me and Kelly 4 years to get married. Because I was holding on for the first couple of years that maybe that possibility would open up again. And I'm so very thankful that it didn't. But that was my life. That was who I was. That was what I was wanting. I had fucked this up. I wanted to fix it. I'm glad that it shook out the way that it did. I'm glad for me. Because my life is infinitely better with my wife. Our life together, our children together, is exactly everything that I wanted, for the most part. Like, we have our ups and downs, we have our bumps along the way, but it is nothing major. Really, most of it is me, once again. Her life went a little bit differently after that, and I'm so very, very sad for that. Like, we could have had what me and Kelly have, but I fucked that up. And because I fucked that up, her life did not go as nice as mine. And I hate that. Right? I do. I hate that. I feel responsible for that, even though I'm probably not. Right? There was a lot of drug addiction. There was a lot of things. And that's her story, so I'm not going to get into it. But this is me taking responsibility for me in a public manner. Like, I fucked that up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of entertainment, right? I don't know, there was a lot of enlightenment in here, but people wanted to know. And this is, like, I am so transparent, y'all. Like, anything that is mine, I will let you know. Like, when I fuck up, and I own that these days. I didn't before, but I do now. This is that. This is the process of showing that, but this is me relaying to the crew a story that you wanted. I am sure that at some point the Navy stories will come out. I could probably do a 3-hour video and y'all would listen to it, right? The people that are here right now, y'all would listen to it, but it serves a different purpose for a different time. I feel like I have hit all of the major points of who I am and how I got here, at least up until I met my wife. We met at the bar, right? I was a karaoke DJ. She gave me her number as a tip. I didn't buy her the first drink. I don't buy drinks for women. I don't do it. Everybody's like, well, you pay in one way or another. I didn't. That was just not what I did. I didn't buy drinks for strippers. I didn't tip the strippers. I've never bought a woman that I was dating a drink. Like, we went out to eat and sometimes I would pay, sometimes she would pay. But it was never like, I'm going to pay for your drink so that you will give me something. And that was not it, right? those things come naturally because I am good at it. And so those things happen. We met at the bar. She gave me her number, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Right? My first impression of her was like, she's got a nice ass. Hers was, I'm going to marry that guy. She spoke it into existence. She manifested our relationship. It happened. It works. I'm happy. So if I'm under a spell, keep me there. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I'm praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.